It was just after 4 a.m. in Moscow, Idaho. Inside a quiet house on King Road, the world of 4 bright college students was ending silently, violently, without warning. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, 2 one-year-old Kaylee Goncalves stirred. Beside her, her best friend Madison Mogen was asleep. They'd spent the night laughing, posting photos, sharing food. It was supposed to be one of those carefree college nights that blur into memories. But this night would never blur, it would burn. Downstairs, Xana Kernodle was still awake, scrolling through TikTok, texting, half laughing. Her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was with her. They'd only been dating a few months, but everyone said they were inseparable. None of them saw him coming. A figure moved through the shadows of the house, silent, determined, and cloaked in darkness. He wasn't there to steal. He wasn't there to threaten. He was there to kill. One by one, he entered their rooms. One by one, he took their lives, leaving behind only the sound of his breath, the smear of blood, and a knife sheath that would later unlock everything. In the stillness that followed, a dog barked. A roommate opened her door and froze. She saw him, dressed in black, mask covering his face. He walked past her like she was a ghost, and then he was gone. 4 lives ended in under 20 minutes. And the town of Moscow would never feel safe again. College students packed their cars and fled campus. Parents stopped answering unknown calls. Social media exploded with rumors. Candlelight vigils blurred with police sirens. A town that hadn't seen a single homicide in 7 years was suddenly haunted by 4. There were no signs of forced entry, no calls to 911 for 8 full hours, no clear motive. Only one question hung in the air, heavy and cold. Who could do something this horrific, and why? As families began to mourn, as friends searched for answers, as a nation watched in horror, an invisible figure slipped away unnoticed. He thought he got away with it. He didn't. Because what he didn't know was that the house itself was already talking. A picturesque college town nestled in the rolling hills of the Palouse region. A place where students ride bikes to class, neighbors wave from porches, and the loudest sounds at night come from laughter drifting out of fraternity parties. But on this day, nothing was ordinary. Because that morning, a 911 call shattered the illusion of safety. Just before noon, a panicked voice reached Latter County Dispatch. It wasn't from a passerby. It wasn't from someone outside the house. It came from within. The words were jumbled, confused, almost surreal. There's someone, they're not waking up. There's blood, lots of blood. Police arrived minutes later at 1122 King Road, a 3-level off-campus rental house just a stone's throw from the University of Idaho campus. The scene they entered was nothing short of disturbing. 4 students, brutally murdered, with no signs of forced entry. The victims? Kaylee Goncalves, 21, a senior set to graduate early. Madison Mogen, 21, her best friend since 6th grade. Xana Kernodle, 20, a fun-loving junior. Ethan Chapin, 20, Xana's boyfriend, spending the night. 2 other roommates had survived. One of them had seen something, or someone, but out of fear or shock they didn't call 911 until hours later. That delay would become one of the case's most puzzling and controversial points. But even before forensics arrived, one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a targeted attack. All 4 students had been stabbed multiple times, some in their sleep, others while awake. The house bore no signs of struggle at the entry points, and nothing had been stolen. Cell phones, cash, even laptops were untouched. The initial question was chilling. Was this someone they knew? Moscow Police Chief James Fry, his voice trembling at the first press conference, told the public, "We do not believe there is an ongoing threat." But residents weren't convinced. How could there not be a threat when the killer was still out there? And the killer had vanished. The internet explodes with theories. Within 24 hours, the case went viral. TikTokers dissected floor plans, Redditors analyzed timestamps, YouTube channels spun theory after theory, from jealous exes to a thrill killer. The hashtag number Idaho4 trended worldwide. People searched for signs, any hint of who could have done something so personal, because that's what made it terrifying. It wasn't distant. It wasn't random. The killer had entered their home, crept up their stairs, walked their hallways. They were hunted, and yet no one heard anything. No neighbors saw anything. No security footage surfaced. It was like the killer had moved through shadows, invisible. The house itself becomes a character. 1122 King Road wasn't just a backdrop. It was a key player. 3 floors. 6 bedrooms. Multiple entries. A party house. A safe place. A hangout spot for dozens of students on weekends. But in death, the house told a different story. Investigators noted that the sliding door downstairs had been left unlocked. The killer may have known the layout, known who was staying where, known who was awake, and who wasn't. And then there was the strange detail that would spark endless speculation. A tan leather knife sheath found next to Madison Mogen's body. It bore a single clue, a US Marine Corps insignia. No fingerprints. But something else. DNA. Still, that discovery would not be made public for weeks. What made this crime so terrifying? It wasn't just the brutality, it was the randomness. There was no obvious motive, no sexual assault, no forced entry, no note, no warning. These weren't people living risky lives. They were students, friends, kids who had fallen asleep after a fun Saturday night out. One moment, they were scrolling Instagram. The next, they were gone. And the suspect? No one had any idea. The initial pool of possibilities was huge. Was it someone at the bar that night? Someone from a dating app? A stalker? An angry classmate? A jealous ex? Authorities worked around the clock, but pressure was mounting. Parents were furious. Students were terrified. And the clock was ticking. Because in this small town, with just 36 officers in the entire police department, this wasn't just a murder. It was the worst thing that had ever happened. A horrible, creepy, chilling mystery. And the killer was still out there. Oh, truly feel the weight of this tragedy. You need to understand who they were, not just as victims, but as people. Because behind every headline and hashtag were vibrant, real lives, and the echoes of who they could have been. Root Kaylee Goncalves. She was the spark. A 21-year-old senior majoring in general studies, Kaylee was known for her fierce loyalty, radiant smile, and plans that reached far beyond Moscow. She was set to graduate early, already had a job lined up, and had just bought a new Range Rover, her dream car. She was visiting town that weekend to show it off, to party with her best friend, and to say goodbye to her college years. She was ready to launch into life. But life never got to launch her back. Kaylee's family describes her as fire and love wrapped in one soul. She adored animals, especially her dog, Murphy, and had a deep connection to her siblings. Her bond with her parents was tight. Her laughter, they say, could warm up any room. She and Madison had grown up together since 6th grade, inseparable, sometimes mistaken for sisters. They were sharing the same bed when they died. And maybe, in a way, that was the only comfort their families could cling to, that they were together in the end. Maddie Mogen. Madison was the calm to Kaylee's storm. At 21, she was studying marketing and was deeply involved in her sorority, Pi Beta Phi. Friends described her as compassionate, thoughtful, and organized, the kind of girl who kept her whole friend group grounded. Madison had a long-term boyfriend who adored her. They had dreams of traveling, building careers, and eventually starting a life together. She worked part-time at a local restaurant, the Corner Club, a popular bar in downtown Moscow. There, she was more than just an employee. She was a favorite. Photos of Maddie and Kaylee together show 2 girls in sync, matching outfits, arm-in-arm smiles, endless laughter. In life, they leaned on each other. In death, they never let go. Xana Kernodle. Xana was the light. At 20 years old, she was studying marketing and was known for her free-spirited nature. She loved music, spontaneous dance parties, and sharing goofy videos with her sisters. She had a mischievous grin and a tender heart. She was the type of friend who never showed up empty-handed. If you were crying, Xana was already in your driveway with snacks and comfort. She had recently started dating Ethan Chapin, and they were quickly becoming the talk of campus. Everyone saw how happy she was when she was with him. On the night of the murders, Xana had been scrolling TikTok at 4:12 a.m., minutes before the attack reached her. She likely fought the hardest. Her injuries were the most defensive. She refused to go down without resistance. Her bravery may have disrupted the killer's plan and ultimately helped investigators. Ethan Chapin. He was the glue. 20 years old, a triplet, and a student athlete. Ethan was studying recreation, sport, and tourism management. He was funny, goofy, and deeply kind, the kind of person who never left you out. He came from a close-knit family. His brother and sister, both attending the same university, were his best friends. His mother said they were raised as a unit. They even shared some classes together. Ethan didn't live at 1122 King Road, but he was sleeping over at Xana's that night. He was killed next to her. His last moments likely spent trying to protect her. His siblings would later speak at his memorial, barely able to hold their grief. His mother, Stacy, would go on to become a public advocate for kindness and grace in the aftermath of horror. Dylan Mortensen. The roommate who saw the killer. Dylan survived, and with survival came trauma. She was one of the two roommates who lived through that night, and the one who, at around 4:17 a.m., saw the killer walking past her in the hallway. He wore a mask. He was dressed in black. She remembers bushy eyebrows and a chilling silence. She froze, paralyzed by fear. Many would ask why she didn't call the police immediately. But trauma doesn't always follow logic. She was young, she was afraid, she may not have even understood what she'd witnessed. In a powerful statement at sentencing, Dylan described the years of guilt, terror, and grief that followed. I used to feel safe with my bedroom door closed. Now, I can't close it. I replay that moment every night. She lives with the question that haunts many survivors. Why them? Not me. One ziblo. The families left behind. Each family was cracked wide open. Kaylee's parents became relentless advocates for justice, attending every hearing, speaking to media, and pushing law enforcement for answers. Madison's family, quieter in the public eye, stayed strong through private faith and community. Xana's father would later say, "She was my everything, my best friend, my heart." Ethan's mother turned her heartbreak into public grace. In the face of trauma, she chose compassion, even toward the justice system. Bryan Kohberger. The name no one knew. At this stage in the story, his name hadn't surfaced. But hundreds of miles away, a criminology PhD student was watching the case unfold, reading every headline, following every update, and continuing his life as if nothing happened. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't frightened. He was studying. And in classrooms, he was asking disturbing questions about how criminals feel after killing. The full reveal would come later. But even before his name was known, the dark silhouette of the killer had begun to take shape in the minds of investigators. Because behind the horror was a mind calculated, deliberate, cold. This section walks you through the 13th of November, 2022 moment by moment as if you're in the house that night. Suspenseful, immersive, and emotionally intense, while remaining respectful to the victims. Saturday, the 12th of November, 2022. It started like any other weekend night in a college town. The air was crisp with the final stretch of fall. Lights twinkled from frat houses and laughter echoed through campus streets. No one knew the horror that was brewing silently just beneath the surface. At 1122 King Road, 6 roommates occupied a cozy 3-story home, an off-campus residence filled with photographs, posters, fairy lights, and the residue of hundreds of college memories. That night, Kaylee and Maddie dressed up to go downtown. They took smiling selfies. They laughed, arm in arm, walking to the Corner Club, a local bar they knew well. Security footage would later capture them standing outside the club, chatting and carefree. Just after 1:30 a.m., at the same time, Xana and Ethan attended a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity house, just a few blocks away. Friends remember seeing them dancing, smiling completely unaware that it would be the last time they'd be seen alive in public. By 1:56 a.m., Kaylee and Maddie were seen at a nearby food truck. They ordered carbonara pasta and joked with the cook. Maddie leaned on Kaylee's shoulder. There were no signs of fear, no clue that someone might have been watching them even then. They got a ride home from a sober driver, arriving back at the King Road house. By 1:56 a.m., Xana and Ethan returned around the same time. Inside, the house grew quiet. The lights went off. Laughter faded. Sleep slowly settled in. But not everyone had gone to bed. Timeline of terror. 2:44 a.m. The phone belonging to Kaylee begins calling her ex-boyfriend. 7 calls in total are made between 2:44 and 2:52 a.m. Some believe she was trying to warn him. Others say she simply wanted to talk. We'll never know. -6:12, 4:12 a.m. Xana is active on TikTok. It's the last known digital trace of any of the victims. 3:29 a.m. to 4:20 a.m. A white Hyundai Elantra makes several passes around the neighborhood, captured by surveillance footage. The vehicle slows near the house, drives away, and returns multiple times. It's like a predator circling prey. Around 4 a.m., the killer enters the home. The sliding glass door on the second floor, often left unlocked by the girls, becomes the entry point. He's dressed in all black, masked, gloved, silent. He doesn't stumble in blindly. He knows the layout. He knows who sleeps where. This wasn't random, it was targeted. The attacks begin. He climbs to the 3rd floor first, where Kaylee and Madison are asleep in the same bed. According to autopsy reports, they had no defensive wounds. They were likely killed in their sleep swiftly, cruelly. The coroner would later say, "It was a brutal scene. I've never seen anything like it." Beside Madison's body lies the tan leather knife sheath with a USMC logo on it. He either drops it by accident or leaves it as a silent signature. Either way, it will be his downfall. Then he descends to the 2nd floor, Xana and Ethan's room. But this time, he meets resistance. Xana is awake. Maybe she heard something. Maybe she sensed something. The scene in that room tells a different story. A struggle, movement, defensive wounds. Blood patterns suggest Xana fought. She scratched. She screamed. Her resistance may have startled him. Ethan was attacked next, struck before he could even rise. The brutality was absolute. The coroner would later say the wounds were so deep, some had pierced organs entirely. But even then, the killer didn't flee. The surviving roommate sees him. At 4:17 a.m., Dylan Mortensen, one of the surviving roommates, opens her door. She hears crying, whimpering. A male voice saying softly, "It's okay. I'm going to help you." Then she sees him. Tall, black clothes, masked, bushy eyebrows visible through the slit. He walks past her calm, unhurried, and exits through the sliding glass door. She's frozen in shock. Fear wraps around her like chains. She retreats into her room and locks the door. It isn't until 11:58 a.m. that a 911 call is finally made. By then, the killer has been gone for nearly 8 hours. The house is still. The silence is deafening. The aftermath, inside the house. When officers arrive, they are greeted by chaos. Blood seeping through mattresses. 4 young victims. No signs of forced entry. Cell phones still on nightstands. Murphy, Kaylee's dog, locked in her room, unharmed but distressed. It's a scene unlike anything Moscow police have ever encountered. The officers on duty that day would later say nothing in their careers prepared them for what they walked into. Even hardened FBI agents called it one of the most gruesome, bizarre, and disturbing crime scenes they'd ever worked. And in the middle of it all, no one had seen the killer leave. No alarms, no broken windows. Just one small leather sheath holding the first invisible thread that would slowly lead to the truth. The killer's exit. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes and university buildings show the white Elantra speeding away from the scene around 4:20 a.m. Phone records would later reveal that Kohberger's device had been in airplane mode during the window of the murders. But by 4:48 a.m., it pings again back near Pullman, Washington, just 10 miles away. He returns home, parks, sleeps. Just like that, he disappears, and the house goes quiet again. But the story doesn't end there, because what Bryan Kohberger didn't know was that every movement he made, every careless choice, was already unraveling his disguise. He left behind his DNA. He underestimated the cameras. He thought they wouldn't find him, but they were coming, and when they did, the truth would be more terrifying than anyone imagined. The clock was ticking. 4 students brutally murdered in the dead of night, a house full of unanswered questions, and a town drowning in fear. The killer had vanished without a trace, or so it seemed. But in the silence left behind, the evidence began to speak. Detectives from the Moscow Police Department, supported by the FBI and Idaho State Police, faced one of the most complex and emotionally charged cases in the state's history. At first, there were more questions than answers. No forced entry. No stolen property. 2 roommates alive. No murder weapon. No named suspect. And then there was the sheer volume of data, over 20,000 tips, 113 pieces of physical evidence, 4 victims' digital footprints, and the watchful, obsessive gaze of millions of online viewers trying to crack the case in real time. But buried in all that noise, detectives clung to one tiny detail. That knife sheath. Found on the bed next to Madison Mogen, it seemed almost like a calling card. And inside the sheath was a single source of male DNA. Unknown, unidentified, but a start. While waiting on the DNA analysis, investigators focused on another vital clue, a white Hyundai Elantra. Reviewing hours of surveillance footage from the University of Idaho, nearby gas stations, traffic cameras, and even neighborhood doorbells, analysts pinpointed a 2011-2013 model Elantra circling the crime scene between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m., making at least 3 passes near the house before finally disappearing. The footage chilled investigators. This car wasn't lost. It wasn't driving randomly. It was stalking the house. A search of regional vehicle registrations revealed 22,000 matching Elantras, but one stood out almost immediately. Bryan Kohberger, a 8-year-old PhD student at Washington State University, just 10 miles away in Pullman. He was studying criminology, specifically the psychology of violent offenders. He had no criminal record, no speeding tickets, no known connection to the victims. But when detectives dug deeper, the red flags multiplied. He owned a white Elantra. His phone pinged near the murder house on multiple occasions before the murders, as early as August 2022, months prior. On the night of the murders, his phone mysteriously shut off between 2:47 and 4:48 a.m., the exact time frame of the killings. Security footage showed his car returning to Pullman around 5 a.m., just after the crime. It wasn't just coincidence, it was a pattern. The real breakthrough came in December 2022. The DNA found on the knife sheath didn't match anyone in the criminal database, but the FBI turned to genetic genealogy, comparing the unknown DNA to profiles submitted on ancestry websites. It led to a distant family tree, and ultimately, to Bryan Kohberger's father. Agents conducted a covert trash pull, outside the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania. DNA from his father matched the Sheath DNA with near certainty. The monster had a name, and he had no idea they were coming for him. On the 30th of December, 2022, a SWAT team descended on the Kohberger home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, just days after he'd completed his semester and returned home for the holidays. At 1:30 a.m., Bryan was taken into custody, shocked, silent, and cold. He showed no signs of resistance, but had visible cuts on his hands and bruising on his face. Police seized multiple items from his parents' home, including a black face mask, gloves, a computer tower, a phone, a book with no title, just a thick spine, blank pages, and most eerily, a collection of hair strands, plastic bags, and a vacuum cleaner with potential traces of DNA. His family was stunned. His students, he was a teaching assistant, were horrified. The man who had been lecturing about criminal behavior was now the prime suspect in one of the most disturbing college murders in recent history. During his first questioning by law enforcement, Kohberger appeared unbothered. He asked if anyone else had been arrested. He made small talk about spirituality and sports. At no point did he express shock, fear, or remorse. One officer described the interaction as deeply unnerving. Kohberger waived his extradition rights and was flown back to Idaho to face charges: 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of felony burglary. Once law enforcement had access to his phone and computer history, what they found only deepened the horror. He had searched for the crime scene after the murders, looking up news articles about the case repeatedly. He had used a police scanner app to monitor chatter the morning of the murders. A woman he matched with on Tinder months prior told police he asked her what she thought the worst way to die was, and then mentioned a car bar knife. He revisited the crime scene hours after the murders, as if returning to admire his work. He wasn't just a killer. He was obsessed with being smarter than everyone trying to catch him. As news of Kohberger's arrest broke, the families of the victims finally had a name to place their grief on. Kaylee's father, Steve Goncalves, called it a start but not closure. He vowed to attend every hearing, every motion, every trial moment. Ethan's mom, Xana Chapin, begged the public to remember the victims, not the killer. He is not worthy of their names, she said. But even as relief came, fear lingered. Could they prove it in court? Would he walk free on a technicality? Why did he choose them? And the most haunting question of all, was this really his first time? By late 2023, 1122 King Road, the once lively off-campus home was demolished, cleared, erased from the landscape. But no demolition could erase what had happened there. As the case reached the courts, something even more chilling began to emerge: the psychology of Bryan Kohberger. And the question everyone feared the answer to: was this his first time? Or the first time he got caught? In a series of court-released documents, the case against Bryan Kohberger crystallized, not just in data and DNA, but in something darker: behavioral obsession. The prosecution didn't just have physical evidence. They had his movements, his thoughts, his patterns. And what emerged was the portrait of a twisted, calculating, and eerily detached killer. Kohberger's cell phone had been in the immediate area of the King Road house 12 different times prior to the murders. Most of these visits occurred late at night or early in the morning, when the house would be dark, quiet, and vulnerable. He wasn't just scouting. He was hunting. Authorities believed he had been watching the house for weeks, tracking schedules, movements, entrances, the lights, the comings and goings, even the dog barking patterns. He knew the layout, the sleeping arrangements. He didn't pick the house by chance. He picked it with purpose. While he was stalking victims, Kohberger was also completing a PhD in criminology. He studied the mind of serial killers. He authored disturbing academic papers. One, in particular, asked criminals to describe in detail their thoughts and feelings before, during, and after committing crimes. It was part of a research study he claimed was for understanding decision-making in violent crimes. The questions were unnerving. What was your emotion during the crime? How did you select your target? What was the first move you made? What no one knew then was that Kohberger wasn't studying killers. He was rehearsing. After committing the murders, he returned to the house just hours later at 9:12 a.m., according to cell phone records. He drove past the crime scene again. Why? Curiosity? Arrogance? Or some deeper, darker satisfaction? This wasn't someone racked with guilt. This was someone who wanted to watch the aftermath unfold. Who may have walked past crying students, first responders, and yellow tape with complete emotional detachment. The same man who texted classmates later that day as if nothing happened. The same man who graded papers, who made plans, who smiled at Starbucks baristas. And all the while, he knew what he'd done. Throughout months of hearings and pre-trial motions, Bryan Kohberger remained expressionless. He stared straight ahead. No tears, no apologies, no reaction even when the families described how their lives had shattered. He refused to enter a plea. So the court entered not guilty on his behalf. The silence only made the horror louder. It wasn't just the DNA, not just the surveillance, not just the stalking. It was the mistake. That knife sheath left beside Madison Mogen carried his DNA inside the button clasp. It was the only place in the entire house with male DNA not belonging to the victims or roommates. It told a complete story. He brought the weapon. He carried it in the sheath. He took it out to kill. And in the adrenaline of the moment, he forgot to take it with him. That single error unraveled his entire plan. Without it, the case may have remained a mystery. With it, justice had a thread to follow, and they pulled it all the way to a courtroom. In the summer of 2025, families were invited to speak at sentencing. Though Kohberger ultimately pleaded guilty, sparing the state a full trial, the emotional weight of that courtroom was unlike anything Moscow had ever seen. Kaylee's sister, Olivia, stood and said, "You are not a phantom. You are not a criminal mastermind. You are a coward." Xana's dad described replaying her final screams in his mind every night. Dylan Mortensen, the surviving roommate, wrote, "You turned our safe place into a haunted shell. I see your face every time I close my eyes." Through it all, Bryan Kohberger sat silently. No tears, no defense, no acknowledgement. And in that silence, the world saw him for what he truly was. Not a genius, not a mastermind, not some misunderstood prodigy, just a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. But in the end, he was betrayed by the very discipline he claimed to master: forensics, behavior, psychology. His arrogance led him back to the scene. His obsession left behind the evidence. His ego made him believe he could walk free. But the truth? He never had a chance. Because even if he wore gloves, even if he studied the law, even if he whispered, "I'm going to help you," the house remembered. The town remembered. The victims still speak in every tear, in every courtroom seat, in every candle still flickering on the University of Idaho campus. The 2nd of July, 2025, Latter County Courthouse, Idaho. The nation watches. Cameras wait. Parents hold their breath. After nearly 3 years of silence, speculation, and emotional devastation, Bryan Christopher Kohberger finally speaks just 2 words. "Guilty, Your Honor." The man who once insisted on a not guilty plea. The man who sat through hearing after hearing without emotion. The man who never explained why. Now confesses, but not out of remorse, not out of sudden revelation. The plea comes with a deal life in prison without the possibility of parole, in exchange for removing the death penalty from the table. The court accepts Kohberger's guilty plea on the following charges: 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of felony burglary. He is sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, an additional 10-year sentence for burglary, fines exceeding $270,000, allocated to the victims' families.